Welcome back, everyone. A teen mother wants to get the message out about overcoming the obstacles of teenage pregnancy. Summer Owens talks about her experience as a teenage mother giving birth in her new book, which is called Life After Birth, the memoir of survival and success of a teenage mother. This is it right here. She says she wrote this book not just to encourage not to encourage teenage pregnancy, excuse me, but to motivate teenage parents to make positive changes in their lives. So good to see you and talk to you about this book because I've heard a lot about it. Before we kind of get into exactly what you're dealing with in the book, let's talk about what motivated you to write this particular thing.
Thanks for having me, first of all, Terrance. I appreciate it. I decided to write the book because I wanted to share my story about being a teenage mother. It's a very challenging life, and a lot of teenage mothers and young mothers sometimes give up. They give up on their dreams because it is so hard. But I wanted to share my story to let them know that it's still possible. You can still finish high school, you can still go to college, you can still have a career.
What do you think was unique about your experience?
Well, I think there's several things that were unique about my experience that I shared throughout the book. But I think the main thing that's unique about it is the fact that I was able to persevere. So many people do give up, and I was able to not, I don't think, just succeed, but to succeed what I think is a high level.
You said you were in school, in college, with your son. All right, talk about that experience. I mean, college itself can be tough enough, much less trying to raise a child with you.
Absolutely. When I finished high school, so I actually gave birth to my son when I was in the 10th grade.
Okay.
And then I came to Memphis. I attended the University of Memphis. And he came to school with me.
Did you guys live in the dorms together, or did you live in off-campus apartment?
My first year, and that was the other thing that we talked about earlier, is the support. My first year of college, he actually stayed with my grandmother in Jackson, Tennessee. But I wanted to be true to my responsibility as a teenage mother. I brought him to school with me the next year. She agreed to let him stay while I got used to being in college. And my next year of college, I got an apartment off campus for him to come and live with me.
How were you able to balance that? At that point, I'm sure he was going to daycare. How were you able to get him to daycare, pay for all of that? How were you able to balance life?
Well, initially, I couldn't afford daycare. So he came to class with me a lot, and I was very active on campus, so I was involved in a lot of organizations, and they actually helped me out with childcare. Sometimes the secretaries would keep him. Eventually, I was able to afford childcare. University of Memphis has discounted childcare, and I was able to get him to the childcare program there. So it was definitely a challenge, but I did what it took to make it work.
If there is a lesson to be learned out of your experience, what might it be?
I think the first lesson is what I talk about in the book, has how hard it is being a teenage mother. So if you aren't one already, don't become one.
You know, that's easier said than done, though. I mean, your mom said, don't. I'm sure you guys had that conversation. Don't become a teenage mother, but it happened. I mean, that's easier said than done.
It's absolutely easier said than done, and you said we had that conversation, and I love my parents to death, but that is a very difficult conversation to have, and some parents don't have the conversation. So I think first step is have that conversation with your kids. And then secondly, for the teenagers, you know, once you're a teenager, you think you're grown and you can't really tell them what to do. Make smart decisions. You know, I think a lot of times they feel inevitable, you know, or invincible is the word, and that these things won't happen to them. And I think they really need to think about that teen pregnancy can happen, and it's a really hard life. So it's definitely easier said than done, but you make decisions every day. And when you make decisions that can get you in this situation.
Let's talk about the first part of the equation you just mentioned, parents having that conversation with their children. You now have a very interesting perspective. You're raising a teenage boy.
I am.
You are a teenage mother yourself, so you've been where he is now and in some of the same situations. How are you having those conversations with him?
Like I said before, it definitely is a hard conversation to have, but I do it. We talk about it. It's uncomfortable, I think, for both of us, but I do it. I tell him, you know, the consequences of it, both physically and emotionally, so that he can understand the decisions that he makes and that there are consequences for all the decisions that he makes.
Should there be an absolute when you're having this conversation? Should it be absolutely, okay, you should never have premarital sex, period? Or how do parents deal with that?
I don't think there can be an absolute, because we're humans. However, I do tell him my beliefs, And my beliefs are that he should wait until he's married to have sex, because we're Christians. And I know that's the right thing to do.
Now, of course, given your situation, I'm sure, likely will come back and say, well, Mom, you did it. I mean, I hear that from so many people, that you try to tell your children the right thing to do, and you try to help them learn from your mistakes, but the inevitable question or the inevitable response is, well, you did it.
Right.
It worked, not necessarily worked, but you did it.
Absolutely.
So how do you respond then?
Well, in that case, I told him that everything is about learning from mistakes, and I told him those were some mistakes that I made. My situation is a little unique, though, and I talk about it in detail in the book. But yeah, I tell him I learned from my mistakes, and these were the things that I did, and the things that I want him to learn and not to have to experience himself. But in some cases, we know that you have to learn and have to experience for yourself, and I tell him I understand that as well. But I let him know where I stand on it. And at the same time, I talk about the consequences.
Right.
You know, if this is a decision that you do make, these are the things that can come from it. Teenage pregnancy, in many cases, is the best thing that could happen.
That's true. There are worse things, many more
Absolutely.
life-threatening things that can happen. As someone who is dealing with a teenager, do you think that the pressures are more than they were even when you were coming up, to have sex, to engage?
I don't know that they're more. I think those pressures have always been there, the different peer pressures for the teenagers. I don't know necessarily they're more. Teenagers today are dealing with a lot more in general, I think, than we were when I was a teenager. So I try to be understanding of those things and talk to him about as much as possible.
I appreciate you coming in to talk with us about the book, and keep up the good work. Very interesting conversation.
Thank you.
Folks, if you'd like some more information about life after birth, go to our website. abc24.com is the address. When you get there, just click on the Find It link. It's on the right-hand side of our homepage. Find all the information you need on Summer there. Very interesting topic of conversation.